Hi guys, and we are now on episode 10 of our Losi DBXL workshop, and we're going to look at these drive shafts. They take quite a bashing on these cars, like a lot of the parts. You've obviously got your two fronts, two rears, but you've also got three in the centre, and you can use the same process for what I'm going to show you for all of these drive shafts. And a little bit of maintenance will keep these things lasting a lot longer. And also, if you do regular maintenance, also replacement of some of the pins, you will get a lot more life out of the components by just doing a small amount of maintenance. So the first job on the front, remove the front wheel. I've already loosened all the bolts off, make it easier. 25mm hex bolt, that is a hex spanner, adjustable spanner, whatever you do for that. Wheel should come off, might be a little bit tight if you haven't took your wheels off for a little while. Now the easiest way I've found to get to this is to remove your front screw from there. I've already removed it, and then this pin will push out like so. Remove your top link bolt like that, and then freeze that up. And then lastly, remove your steering arm. This will then, that comes out like that. That bolts out. Pull the drive shaft out with your boot, and that then gives us access to the front hub, which we can now work on. So for the rear, same 25mm nut. Again, I've already loosened these off. If you haven't took your wheels off regularly, these will be a bit of a tight fit, but that comes off easy enough. And here is the rear axle. Similar to the front, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just remove that bolt there and the top link, and then we'll be able to remove this axle. So removed that bolt, remove our top link, and then push this pin out. Pull the drive shaft boot out, and there we have our rear hub assembly to work on. And for if you have asked, what do I use as a workstand? Well, I actually just use one I use for the UDR. It's a 3D printed one, ever so strong, so there's no problems with the strength of 3D printed parts. If you do want anything like that, then just leave a message in the comments, or if you search RC 3D Prints on Facebook, I'll leave a link below. You can find us on there. So here is our front assembly. We could have undone these bolts, nut and bolt there, and just pulled that bit out and left this bit on the car if we wanted, but I think because you've got a nut on there, it's more difficult to do that, so I've just taken off the front yoke assembly. So the first thing to do to get this apart to service the item is there's a grub screw in here which holds the pin in. Now when you actually got the car the wheel on, this can't come out anyway, so this really only is for when you've got the wheels off. It will likely to be pretty tight. I've already slackened it off on this one, but your chances are it'll be quite tight. This particular one's got 3mm in it. Sometimes they're 2mm, sometimes they're 2.5. It just depends. So make sure you've got the right driver in there. Make sure you've got a good quality driver in there. So once that is slackened off, the pin may fall out, or you may have to push it out. So there, it actually just came out under its own will. So this now we'll just pull off, maybe a little bit tight. In this case it comes off nice and easily. Drive shaft then pushes out like that, and then we have access to the parts that we want to service. Assembling the rear is exactly the same as the process as the front. We put whatever size drive you need. In this instance I'm a 2.5mm on the back, there. Pin, in this instance, slides out nice and easily. Your hex drive comes off, and then your axle pulls out. Good point to now check to see whether there's any damage or bent, whether there's any damage or whether that's bent. So we have our drive shafts on the bench here. We've got two different types. One is the standard pin, and the other one is the upgraded ball connection. Basically the maintenance is going to be exactly the same. One of them's a rear drive shaft, one is a front, but the maintenance will be pretty much exactly the same. So the first things first, we've obviously got the rubber Gators on these. You need to check to see if there's any splits on these. If there's any splits, you need to replace them straight away. The enemy of any drive shaft is dirt and grit, and these are great for keeping the dirt and grit out. Some of the smaller scales, you don't have these on, so you have to be a bit more careful in how you maintain them and keep them clean. So the first thing we'll look at is the pin. Now, if there's any dirt and grease around this, I'll clean it up. I've already cleaned it up. Anything on there, we will clean it up, degrease it, bit of solvent cleaner or something like that. Now, if that pin had some flats on it, which is where it goes into the drive cup, you should replace it. Some small flats is fine, but if it starts to look like if you look on it on the square, if it was to look like a rectangle and there's some real bad flat spots on there, then you ought to replace it. Now the way you replace these is there's a little grub screw in there, 2mm, will probably be very tight. This one's not too bad. So if you remove that completely, and then you need to press out this pin. Now I'm not going to do that because I don't need to do it, but basically use a vise. I would suggest a vise and not hammering it. There are some jigs and tools you can get, but you don't really need to do that. Just get a vise, put a socket over this end so you're pushing into, so you've got support on there, then put something over there to push it out, and that will push out relatively easy. And then when you put the new pin in, just put a small amount of grease just to help it in. But for what we're doing at the moment, we will just put that grub screw back in there. A small amount of thread lock on there will just stop that from coming undone, and that's good. So that's all fine, that's all degreased. Now if we look at our universal joint, now this is where you need a bit of grease in there, but what we're going to do first, we'll take it to bits to show you how it comes to bits and what we can do to clean it. So we've got a 2mm hex in there. I'm going to take that all the way out, set that aside, and then this pin pushes out. And that is your Driveshaft cup. So give that a good clean up there, make sure that's nice and clean. Your pin, give that a clean. And then on here, you have this insert, which can sometimes wear, that's actually where that grub screw went into. And then you've got your other part of your drive shaft. So what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to give these a good clean. If you've got some degreaser you could use, or any sort of wipe, just to get the worst of the grease and dirt off there so it's as clean as you can get it. So I've given them a good little clean. They weren't too bad, there's no wear. Again, if this pin was worn, replace it. If there's any significant wears in any of these holes, then you do need to really replace them because it will only get worse. And once you start to get a bit of play in it, it will just get worse and worse. We're going to use a bit of grease now. Now, I always recommend to use a black moly grease. We're going to put a small amount of grease in here. If you had a drive shaft that didn't have these cups on, then I would still use a small amount of grease, just a little bit in there, just to help that rotation. As we've got the boots on here, we can be a little bit more generous with our grease because that will protect the grease and the dirt from getting into the grease. And if you get dirt in with the grease, it just acts like a grinding paste and wears even quicker. As you'll see, we've got a little 3D printed stand here. If anyone's interested in anything like this, leave a comment, or if you look on Facebook, RC 3D Prints, we do loads of things. We've also got a grease holder here. Well, they just sit in there, you can get all four in there, lid just screws in there. We can customize these, we've done custom branding, colors and the likes, and they're just handy just to store your materials. So this is the one we're actually going to use in a minute. It's a black moly grease, they call it thrust grease sometimes. So what I'm going to do, put a small amount on the inside of here, just to help this rotate, because it rotates in here like that. It rotates in there. So we just put a little bit on there. We then put that back on there, pass our pin through. Good old grub screw. We don't want to grease that. If anything, we'll put a small amount of thread lock on that. Put that into there. Make sure your pin is flush both sides there and there before you do it up. Find where your grub screw is, which is there. Do that up. And there it is. Now, some people would put extra grease in here. With the boot, yes, I suppose you could, because you're not going to worry about dirt getting in there, but I'm not going to bother. I just think these are best, rather than keeping grease in, they're better at keeping dirt out. So we'll put that back on there. Like that. And that is now ready to go back on a hub assembly and back into the car. Pass your axle through. Hex drive on. Pin should just slide straight in. You may have some shims to put in here to make sure that end floats to a minimum. This one hasn't. And then we just do up that. Again, put a bit of thread lock on there if you feel the need to. In this case, the boot's just come off. Push the boot on. And that is your bearings out and serviced. And then it's just a case of putting it back on the car. Refitting this is just the opposite to what we did earlier. put the axle on there, pass the pin through, make sure the drive shaft is located. We will then just put that screw through. This then goes on there. We'll then do them up and then put the wheel on. That's job done. So there we go. We've reassembled the rear axle. We just put that pin back through there, fitted the screw on there, fit the top link, drive shaft, just fits the boot over the drive cup, wheel back on. So 25mm hex to do the wheel up. Only got an adjustable at the moment. And that is the rear done. So here we have our front axle assembly back together after the service. We will just put it back onto, if I move the camera up, you may be able to see we've obviously got to put the drive shaft into the drive cup. Make sure that's nice and clean. That goes back over there like that. Axle through there. Top link in there. Steering through there. And this nut needs to just go back on there. We'll just tighten them all up. So we have put all the bolts back together, axle back on. We'll just slide the diff gator, or sorry, the drive shaft gator over the hex and wheel back on. And that is the front back together. 25mm box to do up your wheel. I'm going to give that hand tight just for the moment. So I hope that's been informative. So we're going to do a whole series on these. If any other thing you want us to cover, please leave a message, and I hope that's been informative. Please do like, share and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. Thanks very much.